For the calendar year 2023, the average income from Amway for all U.S. registered IBOs at the Founders Platinum level and below was $841 before expenses. See www.amway.com/income-disclosure for details and the most up-to-date information. Earnings depend on many factors, including customer base, business experience, effort, dedication, and quality and performance of the downline sales team.
Awesome. Well, we are Jeff and Kathy Joyner. We're from Cincinnati, Ohio. We're personally sponsored in this great business by Vince and Amy Rush. Very excited about that. And we are excited to get a chance to share with you guys for a few minutes about a topic that may be the most important topic that you're ever going to hear about at one of these conferences. And it is a topic that going to make all the difference between success or failure in any endeavor, including this business. And we're going to be talking about your mind. You know, the human mind is the most powerful and complex machine known to man. Your mind and how you use it is what is going to determine whether or not you succeed in this business or anything else that you put your mind to do. Your mind is a tool. And like any other tool, it needs to be wielded with strategy and with precision. And like any other tool, it needs to be sharpened from time to time. And so we're going to be talking today about your mind, about your mindset, about some things that we've learned being part of this business team, some things that have really helped us in our life, and hopefully can help you too as you pursue your dreams. And so I'm going to start you off here with a little quiz. I used to be a college instructor, and so I'm big on quizzes and tests. And so I'm going to give you a little quiz here. And this quiz is designed to test your ability to reach into your mind and access information that you have in your mind. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and everybody just shout out the answers, okay? First question. What animal buries its head in the sand when it's frightened? Ostrich. Okay, good. Question number 2. On what date was the Declaration of Independence signed? I guess a little less certain about that, but July 4th, 1776. Okay, how about this one? What substance, when eaten by children, makes them hyperactive? Sugar. Okay, right? And the fourth one, human beings have several senses, like taste and touch. How many senses are there? 5. Okay, good. You guys all answered those questions like I expect you to. Pretty basic questions, right? What those questions have in common is they come from a wide variety of different academic disciplines, right? Zoology and nutrition and history. You know what else they have in common? Is that your answers to those questions were all 100% incorrect. You were all wrong with your answers to each of those questions. Did you know that ostriches do not bury their heads in the sand? There's not a picture in the history of the world of an ostrich with their head in the sand. It's a myth. When early Western explorers first discovered ostriches, they saw them at a distance, and they were eating food off the ground, and they thought, oh, they must have their heads buried in the sand. Ostriches don't bury their heads in the sand. If they did, they couldn't breathe. That's some nonsense you learned somewhere along the way from somebody else who was repeating it from somebody else who was repeating it from somebody else. You know, the Declaration of Independence was not signed on July 4th, 1776. The final language of that document was approved that day by the Second Continental Congress, but it wasn't signed and didn't become official until August 2nd, 1776. That's when our country was born. Not on July 4th, but on August 2nd. You know that they've done dozens of studies, double-blind studies with children to try to prove a connection between sugar and hyperactivity, and not a single study has been able to find any connection between those two. Even studies focusing specifically on hyperactive kids with attention deficit disorder. There's no link between sugar and hyperactivity. Now, it might make you fat, it might give you, be bad for your teeth, but eating sugar does not make you hyperactive. That's a myth. And the fourth one about human senses, Aristotle was the one who first determined that there were 5 senses: taste, sight, touch, smell. What's the fourth one? The fifth one? In hearing, right? And but you know what? There's been a lot of advancements in science and medicine in the last 2,300 years since Aristotle lived. Scientists now know that there's at least 20 senses. That in addition to those 5, people can sense balance. They can sense acceleration. People can sense the passing of time. You can sense if you're full. You can sense the need to urinate. You can sense itchiness. You can sense hunger. You can sense changes in biometric pressure. And so all of your answers to those questions were all wrong. Now, the impact on your life of having incorrect beliefs about ostriches, senses, and historical dates is negligible, right? That's really not going to affect your life very much. But it begs a question that could have some pretty important bearing on your future, which is, what else do you believe to be true that isn't? What else has somebody taught you along the way that you accepted as fact, that you accepted as truth, and it's absolutely based on a lie? Your mind has been filled up with a lot of information, a lot of beliefs, a lot of opinions. Some of them are true and some of them aren't. And if you want to be successful, you're going to have to learn how to become a wise consumer of information. And people make decisions based on their beliefs. I was speaking at a conference recently. I do professional speaking and training for a living. And I was at a conference, and when I was done, I was passing out handouts to people. They had my outline on it and my contact information. And this woman comes up afterwards, comes marching up to me, and she's got a couple of her employees with her. And you can see her coming, that she's an angry woman who's about to confront me, right? You can just see him coming, boom, boom, boom. And she comes up, and she looks at me, and she goes, "You know what? You shouldn't be doing that." And I said, "Passing out handouts? It's a pretty accepted practice at these conferences." She goes, "No, you shouldn't be using paper. You should go green and send emails instead of putting that on paper. Passing out paper like that is wrong." Wrong. That's a strong word, right? He's making a moral statement. And I said, "Ma'am, what makes you say that?" She goes, "Well, using paper like that, it's bad for the environment." I said, "It is? Why?" She said, "Well, you should be saving trees." And I said, "Really? Why? What makes you say that?" And she was, mortified. That's borderline blasphemy to certain people, that you wouldn't just agree that trees should be saved for the purpose of saving trees. And she said, "Well, saving trees it's good for the environment. When you save trees, it's good for the environment." And I said, "You know what, man, let me explain something to you." And I wouldn't have confronted her, but she confronted me. She chose this fight. I'm not a violent person, but... So I said, "Man, let me tell you something about this piece of paper. This piece of paper, like every piece of paper available for sale at every office supply store in America today, this paper came from trees that were grown at a tree farm for the purpose of making paper." Right? This paper did come from a tree, but it came from a tree that was born to be paper. That's where it came from a tree farm. They have millions of acres of farms where they grow trees to make paper. Nobody's going around the rainforest chopping down trees, or in Yosemite Forest chopping down sequoias to make paper that you're going to go buy at Office Depot. That's not how it works. And she's looking at me, "Oh, I didn't know that." That's apparent that you didn't know that. And I said, "And you know what? Those trees that were born to be made into paper, they were planted, grown, harvested, and turned into paper. Not only was that good for the economy, because there's thousands of jobs created by that process, and if we stop using paper, it's going to hurt the economy. That's a different topic than what you're talking about. You're talking about environmentalism." I said, "But not only is it good for the economy that I'm passing out paper, but you know what else it's good for? The environment." That's because every single day that those millions of trees are alive, you know what they're doing? A process called photosynthesis, which means that those trees are pulling carbon dioxide, out of the atmosphere and turning it into oxygen. Correct? So these paper trees are turning carbon dioxide into oxygen. I said, do you know what that's good for? And she goes, the environment? And I go, yeah. And you know what? If I did what you're challenging me to do and stop using paper, and if you were successful in your quest to save the trees, there'd be less trees planted, less carbon dioxide being translated into oxygen, and that would be, guess what, bad for... She goes, the environment? And I go, yeah. She's like, huh. I go, that hurts, doesn't it? I said, you probably heard the phrase, the truth hurts. There you go. And she was, her mind was like, oh. And her employees are standing there and they're like, because clearly I'm not the first person she has accosted with her agenda, right? And I said, she goes, huh, wow. And I go, well, you know what? It's about to get worse. She goes, what? It's about to get worse? And I said, yeah, because I'm going to give you something to think about. Obviously, this topic is pretty important to you. It's important enough that you would come up and condescendingly, rudely accuse a stranger, right? It must be pretty important to you, environmentalism, right? Well, yeah. And I said, if you are so mixed up, so backwards, so wrong about a topic that is so important to you, what other beliefs are rattling around in that head of yours that are driving your life and guiding your behavior that are completely based on lies and untruths? I said, well, I got to go. God bless you. Nice talking with you. But that woman, hey, you guys laugh at that story, but I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many people in this room 10 minutes ago thought that you should be saving trees. Or have on the end of every one of your emails, please consider the environment before you print this document. Right? And you do that because it sounds good and someone else told you that and they heard it from someone else, but it's just not true. That's just not the way the world works. And so if you want to be successful, you have to get your mindset right. You have to learn how to think and just stop being a follower. And you hear things in school, you hear things in church, you've heard things your whole life that you just blindly accepted. And your life is the result of the quality of that information. And if you're not living your dream life, that means if you've got some bad information, your hard drive has been corrupted. So this weekend is going to give you an opportunity to get your mindset right. You have the right and the opportunity to choose your mindset. And you will choose it. You'll choose a mindset conducive to success or a mindset that is dooming you to failure. One or the other. It's about your mind. It's about ideas and thoughts. It's about learning how to align your thinking with principles of success that are going to allow you to transform your current life into your dream life. But it's not going to happen by accident. And it's not going to happen by osmosis. It's not going to happen because you attend a conference or put in a CD. It's going to take a purposeful choice to learn to think. Kathy's going to share with you here in a minute, but I'll tell you I'll give you a couple little tidbits that I've learned along the way. If you're going to become a wise consumer of information, right, there's lots of information out there today. Research into persuasive theory has found that the average American hears over 3,000 persuasive messages every day. 3,000 times a day, somebody is trying to get you to do something. To buy something, to go somewhere, to do something, to believe something, 3,000 times a day. And most people just suck it in. And whichever messages are the loudest, or the most pervasive, or the most popular, they just accept. And that is the surest, fastest way for you to have an average life. A couple things I'll recommend to you. And I have a master's degree in speech communication, and I took classes on persuasion theory. And here's what they recommend. If you want to be a wise consumer of information, 2 variables, 2 litmus tests that you need to be using every time someone's trying to teach you something, including me, including Alan, including Joe, including anybody. 2 things. Number 1, credibility. How much credibility does the person who's trying to persuade you have on the topic that they're trying to persuade you about? Right? When I came into this business, we came in and we heard some ideas that were like, whoa, that's new. That's different than what we heard before. But you know what we did? We compared credibility. And, Joe Markowitz is going to come in here tonight, and he's got credibility on those issues. Does that make sense? Now, if he started talking about how to be a NASA astronaut, I'm not sure Joe knows that much about that, right? But we started hearing things from people that had enormous credibility on those subjects, certainly more than our neighbors, our college professors, our friends, our family. So credibility, that's the first one. And so it didn't take me very long being around this team to realize that the people teaching from this stage met the requirement of credibility, what they were talking about. They'd done what they were talking about. They'd had success in it, and therefore I could listen to them. So credibility, first variable, first litmus test. The second one is agenda. What's the credibility of the person who's giving you information? Number 2, what's their agenda? Right? Because there are people with high credibility that may have an agenda that doesn't line up with what you want out of life. Does that make sense? Sometimes it's an overt agenda. Sometimes it's a hidden agenda. One of the things I love most about this business, it's the genius of the Amway sales and marketing plan, is that when you sponsor someone in this business, they will always make more money out of that relationship than you will. Vince and Amy Rush sponsored us into this business, mentored us, coached us, got us rolling, and we have made more money off of our relationship than they have. Isn't that awesome? You know what's great about that? That guarantees that every upline in the business has got an incentive to have a pure agenda, right? And the agendas from the people, as I got to know them, kind of a general agenda for all leaders in this business, but specifically the ones that I've experienced and worked with, has been that their agenda for me, they have proven over time, has been to help me. It's been focused on doing what's best for me. Is that also good for them? Of course. Thankfully, right, that it's a win-win. But I love the fact that everything I heard in this business met the requirements of high credibility speakers coming from an agenda, an open agenda, a win-win agenda, but one that was focused on helping me succeed. And so everything you hear this weekend, everything that you're going to hear on a recording and audio in this business, the books that are recommended are all coming from that perspective of helping you succeed. All right, let me give you a couple ideas here, a couple things to be thinking of in terms of developing a thought process that's conducive for you to succeed. I'm going to give you some pointers here. Feel free to take some notes on these. Take them or leave them. Think about how they apply to your business. And here's how I recommend you listen, not just to our talk, but to every talk you're going to hear at a conference like this or on a CD or an audio that you listen to at home. And it's not just, here's how most people listen to any kind of educational situation. Whether you're in school or at a business conference or at church, people listen and they're sitting there waiting to hear something they've never heard before. Right? And if they hear something they've never heard before, they go, nugget, and they write it down. And you come to a 3-day conference and you get home and you got like 4 things written down. Right? You're like, well, I didn't get much out of that. It's because you're listening from the wrong perspective. I recommend a much higher standard, a much higher threshold, which isn't, have I heard this before, but how good am I at this? How good am I at what they're talking about? You're going to hear some of the most powerful leaders in the business sharing on this stage this weekend and on audios available in your car, in your home, on your phone, anytime that you want. And the wise way to consume that information is, how good am I at what they're talking about? Because there's very few ideas that you've never heard before. But there's plenty of success principles that you've heard, but maybe aren't applying as good as you could. So here's the first one. The first key from my perspective on learning how to think. First thing you have to do is you have to admit it. You have to admit it. Write that down in your notes. Admit it. Here's what I mean by that. Repeat after me. You ready? I don't know everything. Doesn't that feel good to get that off your chest? Don't know everything. I will tell you, it took me months in this business to come to a point where I admitted that I didn't know everything and there were some things I had to learn. I was a college instructor at the time, so I was involved in academia. There's this perpetuated that if you're an instructor, you're smarter than everybody else. And I was like, well, that sounds good to me. I'm an instructor. So I bought right into that. And after spending some time in this business, I realized, you know what? I don't know everything. In fact, the more I thought about it, the less that I really knew. And so I developed an attitude of teachability. It's something I still work on today, something I pursue pretty aggressively if I can, is to become more teachable. I tell you, I spent a decade of my life in college classrooms, and I never once heard somebody talking about unlearning. But there's some things that you've learned in your life that you're going to have to unlearn. One of my big ones, something I learned growing up, I was told over and over and over again, don't talk to strangers. Who heard that growing up? Don't talk to strangers. I heard that too. Right? And my parents taught me that because they loved me and they didn't want me to get kidnapped. Right? Your parents didn't want you to get kidnapped too. And so every kid in modern America is taught, don't talk to strangers. That viewpoint, that mindset has a significant crippling effect on your ability to become successful in life. Name a profession that you can succeed at without talking to strangers. Certainly not this one. Right? And there's a whole generation of us that were taught that. And it affected me. When I got in the business, and I'm like, all right, I called all the people I knew, and I got to start meeting strangers. Well, deeply ingrained in me is that you shouldn't talk to strangers. And when I broke free of that, I remember looking back on it and like, why do parents do that? Right? We've all heard that, right? Raise your hand if you've heard, don't talk to strangers. Okay, now keep your hand up if you've ever been kidnapped. Or if you know someone who's been kidnapped. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen so often you should cripple your children and put ideas in their mind that are going to prevent them from having a prosperous life. So it's one of the little things, it's a little thing, but it's a little big thing that I had to unlearn. And it came from admitting that I didn't know everything. Number 2, key to learning how to think properly. Number 2, decide what you want. Another mistake that I made early on in this business was just latching on to the dreams and goals of other people. And it's not until you know exactly what you want out of life that you're going to be able to filter the information coming into your mind to see which applies to you and what doesn't. Does that make sense? It's like if you didn't know where you wanted to go and somebody was giving you directions. Well, these directions aren't doing me much good because I don't know where I want to go. Right? So if you haven't yet decided what you want, you need to get on the stick, figure out what you want. Because it's not until you know exactly what you want that you can learn how to think in a way that's going to get you what you want. Make sense? So decide what you want. Number 3, key to learning how to think. Wash your brain. Wash your brain. Every single person in the history of this world, certainly the history of America, who has decided to become successful at something and started learning success principles from others has been accused of the same thing. Guess what it was? You're being brainwashed. Who's had someone tell you that? Most of the people in here. That is a good sign if you are changing enough that other people notice it and accuse you of being brainwashed. That's a good sign. Congratulations. Here's the reality for me. When I started my own business, and I can't speak for you, I don't know, but when I started my own business, my thinking was limited. It was negative. It was petty, short-sighted, jealous, critical, impulsive. I had developed a thought process that made it absolutely impossible for me to be successful in life. I had no chance of success in life because of the way I thought. Now, that doesn't mean that I wasn't intelligent, because I think I was. I was pretty well educated. You can be intelligent and well educated and still not know how to think. So I started getting around people in this business, and I'm like, well, they're not short-sighted. They're long-term thinkers. They're not impulsive. They're thoughtful. They're not takers. They're givers. I had to wash out of my brain all of the wrong thinking that I had spent a lifetime developing. Does that make sense? People are like, oh, you're getting brainwashed. I'm like, heck yeah, my brain needs a good washing. In fact, what a stupid thing to say, brainwash. Tell me something that wouldn't benefit from getting washed. What's the alternative? Your brain's filthy. Good job. You know what you need is more dirt in your brain. And don't let anyone clean it. Be proud of that dirt. Right? In fact, next time someone tells you that, remember, think of me. So get your brain a good washing. Number 4, key to learning how to think is be smart about your goose. Write that down in your notes. Be smart about your goose. Here's what I mean by that. It has been my experience that your mind is the goose that lays the golden eggs. If there's any secret to this success, right? And there's not a lot of secrets to success. It's pretty well known what it takes to succeed. But if there is a secret to success, it is something you carry around with you every day, and it is your mind. Your mind makes you either powerful or weak. It makes you either impactful or it makes you nothing. It makes you somebody who's going somewhere or somebody who's going nowhere. That all is your mind. Your mind is the secret. Your mind is the goose that lays the golden eggs. Agreed? All right, now let's talk about that for a minute. If you had a goose that laid golden eggs, for real, I don't think there is such a thing, but if there were, what would you do with it? Right? Yeah. One thing you do with it is you would protect it. Right? You wouldn't be letting anybody touch your goose. Right? I look at the gold, if I had a goose that laid golden eggs, I would have a fort, a protective, silo to protect my goose. I would not be letting people get to it. Okay? So you need to protect your mind from negative and from thought processes that are going to mess you up just like you would protect a goose. Okay, what else would you do if you had a goose that laid golden eggs? I bet you'd feed it. You'd feed it good stuff. You'd be down at PetSmart trying to find the highest quality goose food available in the world, right? Because I want to feed this goose the right kind of thing. So you got to protect your mind. That's part of it, but you have to feed your mind. You do that when you come to conferences like this. You do it when you read every night. One of the best ways to do it is by listening to audios. It has never been easier in the history of our type of business to listen to information from successful people than what we have available today. Agreed? It is literally at your fingertips anytime that you want it. And the more that you're listening to those people, sometimes you're going to hear things you haven't heard before. In most cases, it's just going to be subtly aligning your thinking with the thinking of other successful people. Not just successful people, but people who've succeeded doing what you want to do, right? Assuming if you're here today, you want to be successful in this business, our audios are all people who are successful in this business. So if you had a goose that laid golden eggs, you would protect it, you would feed it. The third thing you would do is you'd be trying to find a way to breed that goose, to reproduce and create more geese, right? The only thing better than a goose that lays golden eggs is a whole flock of geese that lays golden eggs. Or maybe that's a gander of geese. I don't know. But you'd want a whole mess of geese that lays golden eggs. And so when you get your mind right and you're protecting it and you're feeding it, now you're in a position to start helping other people get their mind right. But not until you get your mind right first. Does it make sense? You ever been on an airplane and they give the whole safety features? In case of a loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall out of the ceiling, right? And what do they always tell you to do? Put yours on first and then help the people around you. Because if you're unconscious, you're not going to be able to help anybody. And so a lot of people get in this business and the first thing they want to do is start changing other people. And it doesn't work very well. I tried that with my family. Right? I'm 2 weeks into business and I'm mentoring my brothers. They're like, shut up. Right? And I really turned them off. And so I focused on, all right, I'm going to get my mind right first. And it's a process. It's not something that's, once it's done, it's done. It's a lifetime project. But when you get to the point that you got some thinking right with you, then you can start helping other people. Does that make sense? So you protect the goose, you feed the goose, and you reproduce the goose. If someone asks you what you got out of this conference, tell them that. That'll mess them up bad. Protect the goose, feed the goose, and reproduce the goose. That's what I got out of this conference. So hopefully some of that information is going to help you. I think it's going to help you in this weekend, have an open mind to some of the training that you're going to have. But beyond the conferences, to every day when you're back home and when you're engaging in the process of learning, of thinking, of growing. It's all about your mind. It's all about your brain. Right? Your mind is a tool. And a high-quality tool, properly sharpened and used by a master, can be used to build anything. Did you get that? That's good stuff. A high-quality tool, properly sharpened and used by a master, can be used to build anything. Why not use your mind, properly sharpened, to build the dreams that you have for you and your family? You know you can do it. You know you should do it. Why don't we all do it together? Have a great night and a great weekend. Enjoy sharing with you. God bless.